Hello, welcome to Weaver Beyond the Numbers Real Estate Edition podcast. I'm Howard Altshuler, partner in charge of real estate services for Weaver, and as always, joined by my tax partner, Rob Nowak. Today, we have as a special guest another one of our audit partners here in Dallas, Andy Freundlich. Before we start, I wanted to mention that our podcast is for information and education and entertainment purposes only. We are not offering accounting or other advice. However, if there's something that you like or something you want to talk about, please either give us a call or talk to your tax advisor or financial advisor. But actually, we'd rather you give us a call. With that, let's go ahead and get started. So, Rob, what's going to be our subject for today?
Well, since we have Andy joining us, I thought we'd talk about something that I know that he has a lot of interest in and is passionate about, and that's risk management and how risk management, might relate to real estate vis-a-vis, current events that unfold, things we've been through over the last year. And, with that, ask Andy to kick us off a little bit.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much. Glad to join you here. So, a few things. This last year has been simply amazing for a lot of reasons, and we think about how really unprepared we are for everything. Obviously, the country was unprepared for having masks available to us and the personal protective equipment. We recently went through all the storms in Texas and the freezes and the electricity going out and all the things that came about from all that. And so, we're always thinking about risk management. We're thinking about insurance. We're thinking about how we can be healthier. We're thinking about all kinds of things all the time and asking ourselves, the what if questions. So, from a business perspective and from a real estate perspective, we were talking amongst ourselves and we're talking about that quite often. And it's about what do we do to help, stave off some potential things that could occur. And so that's what we wanted to really talk about was just what kind of things come to mind and who do the experts go to and who do companies management go to talk about these types of things.
So, Andy, risk management isn't risk elimination, obviously. And so there's always some type of a cost benefit factor that's involved with that. So kind of along those lines, what are you thinking of kind of at a very high level in terms of what types of risks or kind of how impactful of risks are we thinking about, especially for those in the real estate industry, maybe, tenants or building owners or developers, what have you?
So a couple of things that come to mind relate to me, the first thing that comes to mind is kind of like deferred maintenance. If there's projects that need to take place in a particular property, are the resources going to be available? That's both labor as well as materials and equipment. Is it going to be available? The whole supply chain has been, terribly disrupted over this past year. Projects may cost more to get done. There's a lot, huge amount of talk about in the economy about inflation. How real is it? Is it going to be out of control? And I think we're going to find out a lot about how much things cost. And I think things will cost a lot more than we might expect as building owners and managers try to complete projects in their properties.
When you talk about deferred maintenance, you're talking to a certain extent about things we know that need to be done, right? So what is in front of us, the known knowns? What are your thoughts about the unknowns? And, how do we prepare for, whether it be the physical asset or safeguarding our tenants for, what could be the next thing? Do you have any thoughts on how we prepare for what comes next at some point?
So as building owners and managers and asset managers, get together and they brainstorm the thoughts and review their own properties, plans, and so forth. Not to bring out things that are somewhat obscure, but what do you do with all the glass around these beautiful office buildings? What could happen if things get a little bit out of control? And believe me, we all hope and expect that those things aren't going to happen, but they could happen. So what plans are in place to protect the property, ahead of time? What kind of, just from the standpoint of cybersecurity in a building, what are the things that could happen? What are all the what ifs? And have they tested the systems in place, and how good are they to protect the properties? Goes to the air quality systems and how those are being monitored, and can they be hacked into, and so forth. So there's a lot of issues that can be explored, and there's no better time to explore those issues than as soon as possible.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you bring up a good point, because we've seen so many of those things, and I think we run into that level of complacency of something like that could never happen, and look what's happened over the course of just the last 12 months. And so I think it does need to be brought to the forefront of people to start going, instead of thinking, gee, that could never happen, go, well, that could happen. So how do we deal with it? And is it feasible to try and deal with it, or is it one of those things that we just have to take the chance and and see what happens?
And I think when you deal with perhaps addressing one risk, like you said, Andy, perhaps there are some different systems that are going to be automated that would be put in place to deal with air quality or monitor air quality issues. If those are run through a network-based platform, does it now present another, maybe this is a known unknown, a cybersecurity risk, as you said? Have we now created an environment where we have to further engage in risk management around our technology platforms because we have tried to prevent another risk issue around another life safety system? I think you can go in a lot of different directions when you really start to set out and truly look at mitigating your risk.
Right, and the age of the properties could be an impact too, because maybe some of the older properties that the air quality systems need to be put in place, if they're not, and again, trying to figure out how much those are going to cost and whether the assets are going to be available to the owners and operators to make it the improvements that they need to. They may take a little bit longer than expected, again, based on some of the things that I mentioned earlier.
So Andy, who can someone turn to try and get help with this? I mean, a lot of the developers and building owners, they're really good at modeling out, the risks that they're used to. What's my development risk? What's my entitlement risk? What's my financing risk? But now we're starting to get into some, to some more, shall we say, qualitative factors and a little bit more esoteric things. So, if I'm an owner or I'm a developer and this just isn't my area of expertise, where do I go?
So with any issues that we all have, we all seek higher guidance. If you're not feeling well, you go see you see the doctor or the specialist. And the same thing goes for all business owners too. Perhaps some of the spending that will be taking place, there's some tax ramifications that could be beneficial to the building owners and operators and so forth. To discuss the timing of the improvements and whether they're fully deductible, whether there's some energy credits available to them as a result of that. Those are possibilities. And also with respect to IT systems and so forth. So, obviously, here at Weaver, we've got great resources in our IT practice with IT security, and constantly going through with clients, the what if scenarios, and look to see where there's weaknesses in systems. So the same thing I think goes for talking to your insurance representatives to make sure that cybersecurity and riot insurance and all kinds of different issues are better understood.
It's almost as if it might be beneficial to have a more robust risk management committee, if you will, within your organization that is made up with some of those external stakeholders and internal players that can bring different thoughts to the table and also be a platformer for recommending some potential solutions as well.
Right, absolutely. I mean, certainly the public companies are generally more adept because they really have to make sure that they're attending to the risk management, good risk management practices and so forth. Not that there's clearly opportunities with public companies as well to explore options and where there's weaknesses. But for most private companies, it's they need to have kind of a a group of people, whether it's the advisors, whether it's the boards, and certain outsiders that they really can look to do some generate some good thinking and some brainstorming to make sure that they deal with these issues.
Well, very good. Well, Andy, we really appreciate the insight that you have, and thanks for joining us on our call today.
Yeah, this was the Weaver Beyond the Numbers Real Estate Edition podcast, hosted by Rob Nowak and Howard Altshuler. Pleased to have you join us again this week. Look forward to upcoming episodes published every week. You can always find all of our rebroadcasts and white papers with a lot of good information and content at weaver.com. We look forward to seeing you next week.